Hello and welcome to the Bracken Outdoors podcast, the podcast for outdoor professionals where we deconstruct the skills, attitudes and knowledge you need to make a living in the great outdoors. So, it's just me today, and I thought we'd take a dive into risk and risk management and have a bit of a talk about this, because it's been a topic that's top of my mind for a little bit, but we'll get into that in just a moment. First of all, what is risk? What is risk management? Why am I talking about it? Well, as any outdoor professional will tell you, in fact, anyone who runs activities for other people, risk assessments are a critical part of your professional practice and of what you undertake to make sure that the people in your care stay safe, or at least as safe as possible. So it was originally developed because of this whole litigation society and whatnot. So essentially it was deemed in the court of laws at some point that if you are running an activity, you are responsible for the safety of the individuals in that. And if you are negligent in that, if you don't fulfill those responsibilities adequately, then they can sue you, and essentially you're the one who would end up in legal trouble and responsible for it. Which means that's the big scary thing, which is, okay, how do we manage that risk? Particularly if we're working with children where we're acting in loco parentis, so parents are sending their children in either to school or into our sessions, and we then have a responsibility at the same level as parents to look after them and make sure that they are physically and mentally looked after. But as we've all seen, things have gone, the past couple of decades, things have gone completely in the wrong direction, and it's become a not just risk management, but a risk elimination game. So the idea it's always been to, if there is a risk, let's see how we can eliminate them. Because the idea is basically any injury is one injury too many. Now, there are a couple of flaws with this reasoning, and anyone who's done forest school training or more recent teaching experience training, you will have come across the next level of this, which is the risk benefit analysis, where it says, okay, there are certain things that are risky, but there are benefits to still going ahead with the activity, because in the end the benefits outweigh the risks. So the risks of cutting yourself with a knife are outweighed by the benefits to fine motor control, to well-being, to confidence, to self-actualization, to ability to make things, to survive, to thrive. All of those things wrapped into one. So we need to recognize that there are benefits to everything we do, and there are risks to everything we do. This is a simple concept. So when you're going through, for those who haven't done very much with risk assessment, we'll just go in quickly to how a lot of people calculate and how I personally calculate it. So what you have is you have a certain risk. So say the risk of a person tripping and falling on a walk that you're running. You go, okay, well, what are the likely, who's going to be affected by it, and what is the likely outcome of that? And then you usually have a scoring system. So this varies from person to person, but my scoring system is basically, okay, first of all, you have probability, how likely is it to happen, a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being very rarely through to 5, it's almost certain. And then you have severity. So how serious is it? Is it from just fall over, pick yourself up, you're fine, through to hospitalization, or in some cases death? So, and then you multiply those two together, or add them together, or however your system works. It's your system for these things. And so if you say have a probability of 2 but a severity of 4, then your total risk score in my book would be an 8, which would be relatively high, but not nearly as high as the highest, which would be 25. And then you have bands within that, and you go, okay, what is a level of risk that is too high for me? And then you work around that, and if either the probability or severity is too high, the idea is that you put in place things that make it less likely. And such as, I don't know, wearing gloves when cutting back bramble. That would be, you make it less likely that your hands end up cut. So there we go. Straight protective equipment worn means reduced probability and reduced severity, because if you scratch yourself while wearing gloves, it's not going to be as bad, and you're not going to scratch yourself as often. So we modify it. So this was the old risk management, and you'd end up with a score, and if it was quite a high amount, you'd try and reduce it, and that's acceptable practice. Most people wouldn't argue that you want to reduce risk. You don't want to go shark diving with the budget shark diving company. You want to know that the person who's taking you out to do difficult or dangerous thing is professional, qualified, and has assessed the risk and tried to reduce them to the point where you're unlikely to die. But everyone agrees that's a good thing. But as I said, even if you have a high score with these, this might still be a benefit to running it. So, making stick figures using wool and sticks as a forest school activity is very low risk. So children have a bit of fun, they develop some dexterity, they make something pretty. Great, fantastic. Worthwhile activity. You whittle a wand with them, so they make a wand or a tent peg. Great. So that is higher risk. They're more likely to cut themselves, and if you have sharp knives, they're more likely to cut themselves severely. That's just a fact. That knife is more riskier than a stick and wool. But what you gain from your knife, as I said, all of this confidence, this motor control, this self-control, the ability to make things that are practically useful, particularly in survival scenarios. It opens up a whole different skill set, because you can then make pot hangers for things, and that allows you to filter water, boil water properly, which allows you to then survive in the wilderness, and there's a myriad of other benefits. So just because it's high risk doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. In fact, higher risk in this case means higher reward. Children will find, in general, working with knives more rewarding than weaving something with wool. Particularly boys, it's fantastic. Wow, I get to work with a knife, and oh look what I made with a knife. I used it to carve away the wood. That's fantastic. And that's where we have a look at, okay, there are benefits. And then we start having a conversation about what is acceptable risk. So what really got me thinking about this again was recently I ran some sessions for holiday kids. And it was a drop-off session, so the children were with us for the day. We didn't know most of these children that were with us. And if you're following the strict forest school ethos, you will not use tools or fire with them until you've had 6 weeks with the children to gain an idea of what they're like and their level of maturity, their level of self-control, everything else. Now, this is an ideal scenario. A lot of the time when I'm going out and delivering bushcraft events and workshops and activities, you often are meeting these children or adults for the first time. So you are not quite sure what they're going to do when you give them a knife. And that it obviously increases the risk. And of all of these sessions that run where I've met for the first time, whatever, we've averaged about 1 cut per session. So one of the children will cut their hand somewhere, somehow. That's at least 1, maybe 2 sometimes, but it's a consistent thing. And that made me go back and go, okay, people are getting cut, and my immediate instinct is, okay, what do I need to do to prevent it? And that's a very natural way to look at it, particularly if you're a parent and you're concerned about your child. Like, my child got hurt. Your immediate instinct is, okay, I've got to prevent that from happening again, because I don't like it when my child gets hurt and they're upset about it or whatever. I don't want anyone to feel pain. I don't want anyone to feel hardship. But we know that's not how life works, and that actually insulating people from pain and hardship isn't great in the long run. So anyway, thinking about the fact that these children are cut, going, okay, let's take a deeper look at this. So, what were the circumstances in which they got cut? Was it bad instruction on my part, or was it a lack of concentration from the child? In many cases, it's a lack of concentration. Okay, because no matter how many times you say, don't cut towards yourself, don't cut towards yourself, don't cut towards yourself, inevitably the brain will sometimes fritz, and it'll just not quite be working that one moment, and they'll go, I just want to get that bit off, and just cut towards their finger and gouts of blood. Fun. Okay, so there's nothing in that case vastly wrong with my practice. Okay, should they then be wearing gloves? My forest school training, a lot of practitioners out there, they'll have a child wear the glove on the hand that doesn't have the knife. In which case, you're minimizing the risk, you're lowering the risk. But in my observations, that when there is a glove on that hand, the children are actually more likely to cut themselves or to do something daft, because they develop bad practice, because the glove's there, they don't have to worry so much about the skin. And actually going all the way, I believe that it's a good idea for children to cut themselves on something every now and again. It's the same reason why when we talk about risk management, and so when we do forest school training, we go, okay, children in the outdoors, in woodlands, develop kinesthetic knowledge. They develop knowledge of how their body interacts with the environment. They get feedback from the environment. So the important thing is when you're walking on a flat surface, perfectly flat surface, your body's not getting any feedback from the surface, apart from, okay, it's hard or softer. But when the terrain starts undulating, your body feels a certain amount of feedback. When it leans one way, it'll suddenly lean further than it was on the other slope. when you get on a log that's round and it wobbles, that's immediate feedback that you need to adjust your center of gravity. And if children don't have this kinesthetic kind of balance, if they don't feel this balance, then they don't develop properly, and they don't develop that sense of balance because you're not training that feedback. And so, great, okay, getting them out, climbing on logs, climbing on trees, running over rocky ground, all great. And then the inevitable will happen, child will fall over. And now this is just another bit of feedback. It's the child working out that if I run really fast and I trip and fall, it will hurt. I will scrape myself. I will feel abrasions on my skin. It won't feel amazing, but that will be valuable feedback, so they know, okay, if I do this a certain way, if I climb on a beach log after it's been raining, I will slip and fall off and it will hurt. That's really valuable information. It means later on in life, when they're an adult, when they don't heal as fast, when they don't have that flexibility, if they don't have that kind of ability to bounce back from things, they'll do something daft on a beach log, fall off and break something. Unless we get in at that start and start developing that risk management, the ability to look at something and go, or be on something, so be on a log or be doing something and realize, okay, this is a bad idea. I know what's going to happen here. If it goes wrong, I'm going to do this to manage it, but I'm also going to not do that because that could hurt, and that could hurt badly. It's what we want from our children. We want our children to realize that touching a hot stove is a bad idea. We want children to realize that when they are teenagers and they get a driving license, that they shouldn't drive far too fast for the road conditions. We want them to be able to look at risk and manage it and be comfortable with it and decide what is appropriate risk. I mean, imagine the fun you can have on a mountain bike. That has risk to it, and you go fall off, but unless you've fallen off a few times, you won't understand what the risks are. That if you're going downhill at 50 miles per hour on your mountain bike and you hit the turn the wrong way, that's going to be painful. So you've got to know that. You've got to have awareness. So coming back to the story, we realize, okay, children need to know that knives are sharp. Children need to know the consequences of a knife slipping, that it will cut and it will hurt, and they will then have to sit with a bandage on their finger for the rest of the session. It's just showing them the natural consequences of actions. If you don't pay attention, if you don't do the things that you're told to do, there are consequences. There are consequences to every action, or every inaction. Not doing something gives you a consequence. And the sooner people learn this and become comfortable with this, the better. So we start to see how developing risk and managing risk is okay, is a good thing to do. And we also recognize that there will be injuries. Now, this is something that I've never heard talked about whenever I've done risk management through my years in university, in forest school, whatever. It was like, oh, rare occasion, child cuts himself. I think we should really be prepared a lot more, and parents of children sending their children into forest school should also be prepared and know that they will come home with scraped knees. They will come home with a cut on their hand. They will come home with a bumped head, because they are learning and developing and growing into eventually adults. They are self-sufficient and resilient and able to pick themselves up when they fall over. And we really need to be open about this. That if you're using knives, you will cut yourselves. I've got cuts all over my hands. I did a week in the woods last week on a bushcraft course, and I cut myself, I hurt myself here and there, got massive blisters on the backs of my feet from poorly fitting boots. All of it is a part of learning and growing. And one of the major benefits to developing risk management and dealing with risk is resilience. Now we talk about it so much. We want our children to be resilient. We want our children to be able to pick themselves up every time they fall down. We want them to look at failure as just one step on the path to success. We want all this, but we're not ready to let them fail at something badly enough that they get hurt. Now, I'm not saying that we should simply hand children axes and step back and say, well, it'll do you some good to chop off a couple of toes. Don't worry, we can sew them back on again. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there is a balance. There is a balance, and it's a tricky balance, and a lot of the balance will depend on your own responsibilities within a session, within your own confidence using those same tools. It'll depend on the children and parents you're working with. There are some children that I'm working with that I know their parents are okay if they get a scratch or a cut or whatever, and they're totally fine. They even expect it. I know one young boy who has so many scars already on his hands, and that 90% of those didn't even happen in the session. They happened at home, and that's just the way he is. He's actively engaged in learning and doing and being, and that's fantastic. And I know that if we do something, if we work on something a bit more complicated and he cuts himself or burns himself or something, she's going to be okay with it. It's not going to be angry letters and phone calls and escalation. If you're working in a school, you're going to have to work within the school policies, and sometimes appeasing parents, you've got to steer away from the dangerous stuff. But it's better you might not even have a head teacher who's supportive of risk taking, but doing as much as you can within that is where you need to be. So like I said, I'm not saying wholesale go off and give everyone a chainsaw and just let them loose. It's about the right level of risk. And what I always say whenever I discuss this, or whenever I discuss my role within a session. So my role within a session when it comes to managing risk is to ensure that the children or adults or whoever is under my supervision or on my course never get injured badly. I'm there to reduce the severity, not to prevent it. I'm not there to prevent injury. I'm there to prevent something that will either cause disfigurement, hospitalization, or a loss of life. And that means that I've got to be okay sometimes with injuries happening. And I've also got to continually review my risk assessments and to dynamically risk assess everything. Every time I see a child doing something new that we haven't risk assessed, it is up to me to look at it and go, okay, what if things go badly wrong, what is the worst that could happen here? Okay, the worst that could happen there, if the absolute worst that could happen there was a broken wrist, and it's not likely to happen, then I go, yeah, okay, fine, carry on. If it's something really daft where it's likely to be multiple broken bones, then I go, hey, okay, we're going to modify this. okay, I need you to climb down another meter, and I need you to make sure that you're not over those rocks over there. So I'm just managing it. My job is to reduce the potential for harm, the potential level of harm. But yes, it's a fine line between risk and reward, and it's up to every person to navigate it. But if you are worried about using tools, worried about using knives, worried about setting up zip lines, tree climbing, whatever, there are plenty of people out there running courses. There are fantastic sharp tools courses. I shared one recently that's run by Mel from Wildly Curious. Looked like a fantastic workshop and would give you a whole lot more confidence. Join something like the IOL PPG, the Professional Practice Group for Bushcraft. I remember, fantastic. They are developing good professional practice, and a lot of the members there will be able to help you out with making sure that you're using knives, axes, and saws safely with a group. There's groups like Bushcraft who do fantastic work. There are people out there to help you if you feel worried about this. But don't run away from risk just because risk exists. Don't stop your children running across a field just because they might fall over. You need to be strong in your conviction. You need to stand by your ethics. Go, is this in the best interest of the child? Is preventing a scratch worth the developmental cost that is going to cost the child? Is it worth making a child's life miserable to safeguard them? It's a fine line, and you've got to work it out yourself. As I said, there are people to help you, but at the end of the day, the whole idea of risk management, and the reason why you should probably never copy someone else's risk assessment, is that you have your own things that you're comfortable with. I know that I'm quite well skilled with knives. I'm comfortable teaching knife skills. I will not be teaching anyone to use a chainsaw and there's no point risk assessing that, because I know I don't have the competency myself. I don't have the competency with the group yet. It's all about making sure that things are all lined up and that you are doing the things that are comfortable for you, that work with your site, that work with your children, that work with your parents, that work with the board of directors or whoever you work under with. There are restrictions. It's your job to sift through that and, in your professional opinion, make judgments. Now, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but from my understanding of what a risk assessment is meant to be, it is meant to be a document that shows that you take your responsibility seriously and that you have taken steps to ensure the safety of the people under your protection or under your supervision. It doesn't say anything that you need to eliminate the risk, but you need to take appropriate steps. I appreciate this has been a bit of a drier episode, but it's definitely something worth thinking about, and I'd love to hear your opinions on this, on whether a cut or two is perfectly okay, or whether we should be protecting as much as possible. There are a lot of debates out there: sharp knives, blunt knives, using potato peelers instead of knives. There's merits to most arguments. There are some I wouldn't personally want to defend, but there's it's everyone is deciding what their best practice is, and as long as you're always striving for the best for the people under your instruction, and you are taking what you believe are necessary precautions, I think you'll probably be okay. As long as you've got the best interests of yourself and the other people around you, you'll be okay. So trust in your own judgment a bit, and get advice when you need to. And yeah, with that, I will wrap today up. I will see you in the next episode of Wednesday Wanderings. I hope you've been enjoying those episodes. It's been fun going on a little ramble every week, so hopefully it's been nice having a bit more consistent content coming out, and there's still all sorts of stuff going on YouTube. I'm still pushing hard on the content, trying to get interesting thoughts, perspectives, skills, knowledge and stuff out to you. If you know of anyone who would like to come on the show, or you think would be a good fit, or think it's worth talking to, or if you personally have something you'd like to chat about, whether it's forest school, business practices, marketing, anything, I'd love to hear from you. So if you're on YouTube, drop a comment in the below. If you're listening to this on your podcast platform, then you can drop me a line at info@brackenoutdoors.com. With that, I'll see you all next time. Remember, make the most of every day.